times out properly, and we're live. We are live with the Story Over Everything filmmakers, our yearly signature animation and doc block. Why do we choose to pair animation and documentary? I don't know, but I love it, and I love how this block flowed. And we're here with Sebastian. Let's just go around and you introduce yourselves and clockwise and let everyone know which film you made. We'll start with Sebastian.
Hi everyone, I'm Sebastian and I made a short documentary called Naya der Welt hat 1000 Augen about a female wolf called Naya.
Morgan?
Hi, my name's Morgan. I made the short animated film Forgotten, which is about an elderly gentleman who is essentially isolated in his home.
Yeah?
Hi, so I'm Jan Tomaszewski. I made a short film called Gangnam Beauty, and it's a film about Ollie London, who was born English but feels and identifies as Korean.
And Mark?
My name is Mark. I made a short stop-motion animation film about a group of old photography cameras that are trying to escape their owner's apartment.
Such lovely films. If there's anyone watching who has not checked out Story Over Everything blog, please go check it out. I have so many questions for you, and I hope that the audience engagement will be pretty decent because this is the time usually here when people are just coming off from work. So let's ask the first question of Sebastian and keep this thing going. Sebastian, your film is fascinating. It's just such a remarkable visual viewing experience. I'm curious about this idea that you're exploring in the film of man and nature and how there's sort of a reversal through modernity, that we have sort of isolated ourselves or convinced ourselves, perhaps incorrectly, that we are at the top of the food chain. I'm curious, where does this idea come from in you, and how early in your life can you remember the traces of this idea in yourself, in your work?
I hope I understood the question. That was sometimes a little glitchy, but I think I understood it. So I do not know if I was like the child who was very much into nature and hiking and stuff like that. I think I was, I was inspired by nature, but not like a lot or something. It happened more when I was about 16 and my parents moved to another town here in the Netherlands, and we went living next to a zoo. And I went there a lot, also alone, and I spent a lot of time there. And there, I think I learned a lot about animals and also about my relationship towards animals. Also in a zoo where animals are always in cages, and there's this ambiguity already. And I think it started around there. And later, when I went to film school, I sort of knew I wanted to make films about it. And then it sort of happened. Yeah. Can anyone hear me, or am I glitching a lot?
You're not glitching much at all. Yeah, we heard you. Everyone else heard him fine? Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Morgan, such a timely film. So we, perhaps as a festival, have something against pandemic films. We don't like pandemic films, but we will do pandemic adjacent films. Films that can relate to the pandemic. There was Working from Home, and Forgotten, while not clearly a pandemic film, it's timeless in a sense, is about the neglect of the elderly and perhaps understanding. So I think this is interesting, is in every one of your films, we do these short Q&As, and sometimes when filmmakers have not watched each other's films, they don't understand why they're in the same block. And in here we're talking about the perspective of the other. So in Sebastian's film, we are in the perspective of a wolf traveling. In Morgan's film, we are in the perspective of the elderly before we are ourselves elderly. And I guess in Mark's, we're in the perspective of an inanimate object like a camera and personifying it. So there's a personalization of something that we often don't choose to identify with as equally human. I had a question here. I promise. I had a question. Is there a grandparent or someone in your life that inspired this? Where does this curiosity to explore this question about the experience of the elderly come from?
Yes, there was someone that directly inspired it. It's someone who lives alone. And I remember I was visiting and I saw a tube of like an anti-inflammatory ointment that was specifically for back pain. But this person that I care about, they live alone. And I know that they physically wouldn't be able to apply that where they need it. And that sort of got me thinking on how it feels to have to deal with these things alone. And in particular, it was in the context of the pandemic and thinking about how, especially when someone lives alone, they are often forgotten by a lot of the outside world, and they themselves end up forgetting the outside world because they can't connect with it anymore, especially during the pandemic when people physically weren't allowed out and weren't allowed visitors. So I really wanted to make something that would make people think about that and empathize maybe a bit more with people in those situations, because we ourselves will end up there one day as well.
Is that perhaps the scariest part for us about embracing? Because there's this thing about the neglect of the elderly sometimes comes down to not wanting to see ourselves getting old. It's a reminder that at some point in our lives, we ourselves will need help going to the washroom, or will need help like remembering things, and this is scary. So thank you for creating a film which allows people to empathize and see that experience through the eyes. And I think every year at Pendants we select films that will provoke change, and then we're hoping that a lot of people will watch Forgotten and call a grandparent right after. That would be really lovely. Yeah. Jan, Ollie London. Wow. How did you connect with Ollie and talk about this working relationship? Because it's clear to us watching it that you had a very good relationship together.
Yeah, sure. So actually, in the process of making the film, Ollie London, I discovered somehow their existence quite lately. In the first place, I just wanted to work to do a film about contemporary South Korea and how South Korea attracts people, the soft power of Korea through culture, K-pop, etc. And 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 when I discovered the story of Ollie London, I thought it has to be Ollie. It has to be Ollie playing the part because I was in the first place interested in a very old South Korean tale, and for me this tale was a kind of metaphor of the idea of looking at another person, culture, and the kind of problems that can come from that. And and Ollie was really like a perfect character to embody that tale, because Ollie is has pushed very far the process of wanting to become Korean while not being Korean in the first place. And so, to answer your question about the collaboration, I just reached out to Ollie at that time, because it goes very quickly with social media, and so now he's like super famous, but I think it was like 2 years ago, Ollie was famous, but maybe not as much. And fortunately enough, Ollie answered me, and then since the beginning, Ollie was super enthusiastic about the project, and I think this really made it, this result, because it was a really close collaboration. And what was really good is that Ollie was really willing to put themselves at risk.
That's enormous for any performer to carry such a huge role in the film, because effectively the film is a complete exploration of Holy London and the story of the Korean story. That there has to be so much trust built up that this will not backfire, and I think that speaks to perhaps just you being a good person and them sensing that. Mark, we have a question for you in the audience, and I have some questions for you, but here, how do you make an inanimate object cute and relatable?
I guess it's just finding the characteristics of the object, and kind of like, or just using the object as it is, and just finding a characteristic that it can portray. And what I did for the film was really just kind of study what kind of movements smaller objects would make, larger objects would make, older objects would make. Because if you've seen the film, you'll know that some of the cameras are more modern, some of them are really old. So, with the older ones, I made them more kind of lanky and slower moving, whereas, the bulkier ones have more like a firm kind of walk to them. So, with the smaller ones, it was more about the movements of kind of like waddling, if anything, or just kind of having like little gestures that would, just accentuate the kind of relatable to the size and shape of them.
So, but
basically, my wife and I, we have a vast camera collection. We are camera collectors. We love, anything retro, but cameras especially, because we both have a background in photography. And I just found that they're each their own piece of art. That's the way I look at them. So, having these cameras on display in our house every day, I kind of I've been wanting to do stop motion for a while, and I thought it might be interesting to bring these cameras to life, because they have, like I said before, such unique characteristics, and through that I felt I could tell a story.
Can I say something?
Absolutely.
I
love talk.
I loved like when the DSLR comes out and then he gets startled and his little like flash thing comes up. I just thought, I love that. Like it was so emotive. I was like, oh, yeah, he's startled.
Thank you.
No, I think I hope there's an audience question about music in this film, because if there isn't, I'm going to ask it to you. But we have a question for Sebastian. Carmen asks, Sebastian, what are your thoughts on us observing animals to the point where it is too invasive and disruptive? How can we better inform people to be more respectful, I guess? Respectful. Yeah.
Yeah, good question. The boundaries, yeah. I think I don't know if I have a clear answer on how it should be. I think what I wanted to show with the film is that technology and specifically then on wildlife, it works both ways, but it's up to us to how we want to use it, and it can make us fall in love nature and with a wild creature again, but at the same time it can also put the animal in danger. So I think, I mean, with the GPS collar the wolf got, when she arrived in Belgium, the scientist still had her location. And in the beginning, when she caught a few sheeps, all the farmers, they wanted to get like a sign or something when she was like 300 or 400 meters close to their specific farm, so that they could bring their sheeps in. And this, you could argue in a way that it's an okay thing to do, but I guess then you're messing in a way with nature, which I think we should do as least as possible. So in my opinion, putting a collar on an animal is not a good thing. But it of course also helps wolves and helps animals. So I don't know if that's a satisfying answer. And there was also something about respect.
Yeah, I'll pull the question back up.
How can we be more respectful, I believe, right? Oh, yeah. Respective. Okay.
Respectful.
Yeah.
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 You know, it's interesting. This film, Naya, it really speaks to I think our understanding of our role in nature as human beings, right? Our role as observers, our role as participants, our role as owners, right? Personally, I find it's absurd that I say I own my dog. It's pretty stupid. He didn't agree to be owned by me. So we happen to live in the same place and we exist, and he barks sometimes and I bark sometimes and it's okay, But this concept of ownership is baked into the man as the rapist of nature. This idea of this belongs to me. And I think that this beautiful film exploring the perspective of the wolf walking into the terrain, this is not my Q&A, obviously. It's like no one is interested in hearing what I have to say, but this is, I think this was like 2 years ago. I was just walking and I saw a fox. Very rare sighting, in Toronto, to see a fox just walking down the sidewalk, checking out a fire hydrant. And I was shocked. I was like, wow, this doesn't belong here, but the fox doesn't know that. Right? There's a sort of division. So I think that it's fascinating to explore the displacement and how, as humanity, we're constantly encroaching on land that's not really ours. Right? We do land acknowledgements for over here in Canada. We do land acknowledgements to acknowledge that we are on land that's not ours, as new Canadians, that we are on land that is the indigenous population's land. Don't necessarily think anyone extends that same courtesy to animals whose forests are being taken away. So I think that this film is beautiful in so many ways. If anyone's watching this, please go check out Naya. Check out all of these films. It's incredible. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, of course. Morgan, I think I'd like to ask if you have a question for Jan.
Ooh. How did you pick? Actually, yes.
I know you do. I can see it.
Well, you asked him how you formed that connection, which I was wondering myself when I was watching. I guess just what drove you to make this film? It was so interesting. It was very intense at moments. It was really engaging. It was excellent. I guess just why did you make this piece?
Yes, I went to Korea just on holidays, and I kind of got really fascinated by this society, how it's like cutting edge in technology, but also the question of the body. Plastic surgery is something super common, and there's so much robotics, and I really got fascinated by this idea of engineering identities, engineering bodies, engineering artificial life, these kind of things. And then from that point, I kind of started tracking, because I'm not a fan of K-pop myself, but then I started to track all phenomenons related to South Korea, and I realized the scope, and the importance of what is called Hallyu, which is a Korean wave, how South Korean, models, mostly pop culture models, are exported, and how what they trigger in audiences all over the world. If you've never been to a K-pop concert, it's really worth seeing, because it's fascinating. And I really, then I was on there are groups of fans all over the world, and I started being in these groups, just to see how they act, what they think. And I was really interested by this fascination. People from Europe, US, basically non-Koreans, how strongly they can create some bonds with this other culture, and how they fantasize this culture, how they fetishize this culture. So that's I guess that's why. And then Oli came as a really a kind of paroxystic embodiment of that phenomenon.
Do you think that this metaphor that you've created extends to other things as well? Because I think that this is a very extreme example that you're examining. Yeah, a white, Britisher trying to become Korean through plastic surgery. This does not feel to me like something that I would do, right? But in a way, we are all pretending in some way, are we not? The digital mask that you're talking about, whether it's the physical mask in your story, it's the physical mask, right? But for a lot of us, we are masking emotions and we're masking. So can you talk about the parallels that maybe someone is watching this film and saying, okay, this is very abstract for me. How can I tie it? Because sometimes, we are living in an age where people need to be spoon-fed sometimes, to dot the lines for them. So what are some examples you think that people could draw this parallel to?
The actually you can just see the tale and the film as a kind of quest for individuation, to kind of try to make coincide the social mask and the kind of inner self. So I think you can see it, as a kind of archetype, and that's why I really like tales, because they are more universal. They are universal stories. So of course, this idea of mask, of constantly changing faces, this kind of overgoing metamorphosis of identities. I think it can speak to any of us, and of course, um, all this embodiment is extreme, but I think you can find some layers which are more universal.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. Very thoughtful answer. Mark, no one has asked in the comment section in my feed about the music, so I'm just gonna pull the trigger and ask you this question. So we had earlier a film in which they did not use music at all, and that was a conscious decision. I think you've used music perfectly. So talk about that process. How early in this process were you thinking that music was going to do so much of the heavy lifting? Because after watching this film, people may not realize why they felt some of the things they felt, but I think that music did a little bit of the heavy lifting. So how early was that consciously decided on?
Pretty much straight from the start. And I'll just start by kind of acknowledging the composer. His name's Angelo Oddie. He's based in Toronto here. I've worked with him a couple of times. He's fantastic. And he really helped me kind of develop the whole idea because, I kind of just leave it in the composer's hands. But I said, when I was animating this, I kind of had it in my head where it was a play along melody, almost like when you watch like an old Looney Tunes cartoon and there's just music kind of going through the whole the whole storyline. Is like any movement that they make has a little musical accent to it. So I told him that's kind of the approach that I want to take, and he just kind of went with it, and he just absolutely nailed it. So I think, because there is no dialogue in the film, that you needed those musical accents to kind of accentuate what they're thinking, what they're feeling, kind of what the mood you're supposed to feel. So that's pretty much it.
Perfect. Yeah, it's always surprising to me how often these decisions are made a little bit later, and how often it is a collaborator, like an artist, like a VFX artist or composer coming in and then just adding their own flair, personality, talent to it. But ultimately, it takes a director open to that collaboration and to that idea. There's a question here. Forgotten was so powerful, it made me think of my grandparents, and I wish I had spent more time with them. Sorry, I guess that's a sad thing to say. How do you create that feeling with the medium you were working with? Was it hand drawn?
It was hand drawn, digitally though. I drew this film in Photoshop actually. I would say though, similar to Mark, I would say that feeling that you get, the music played a really strong part. And I'll shout out my composer, Jacob Waxman, who's also a Toronto-based artist. Yeah, I remember when I delivered him the cut of the film and we watched it through, and he sort of said, is there any particular instruments you're wanting? Is it, he understood the mood perfectly. We spoke through that. And I said, no, I trust you. And then I remember he showed me a cut. We watched it together, and it was so much more powerful. It just had so much more impact. It's just incredible the way that music can do that. But yes, the film is hand drawn. It has something like 1,000 individual drawings, which are all done by me. I don't know why I make these decisions. But I mean, I'm very happy with the result, but yes, it's a very painstaking process.
I can only imagine. As a filmmaker, I've never done animation. It's intimidated me for many years, but yet when I think about The Lion King, it's one of my all-time favorites, and it's still, it's still inspiring. We'll end with one final question for all of you, and I'm curious if there's what is one thing that you would like people to take away from your film? Like, what's your message to your audience? Like a post, like, this is what I was trying to say with this, and perhaps it's something that maybe some people miss. That's the other part of this question. Is one thing that you wish the people would understand that you suspect they may not understand about your film? Tough question. Is that too tough? Let's start with Mark. Let's go reverse.
Thanks.
You looked most frustrated and flustered. Sounds like it's time to put Mark on the spot.
Thank you. I think, the whole kind of message is, I guess it's about perspective, my film. It's about, we see things as as people, we see inanimate objects, we kind of take them for granted sometimes. So I felt like, because I have such a strong passion, especially for old cameras, that I find that I collect a lot of these because a lot of people just want to throw them away. They're just of no use to them anymore. But they were so precious to people when they first got them, because they captured all your family memories. It's just, they were so important at one time, but now they're just garbage and just toss them out. So I just wanted to show kind of the importance of the things that we take for granted. And, they might have some sort of feelings too. It's like maybe they were attached to you, maybe they were meaningful to you, or you were meaningful to them. So that's kind of the message I was playing off on mine.
So you want people to give their mug a hug when they get home. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, gratitude. It gives you coffee every morning. Why not? Jan, what's one thing that you were hoping that more audience members would understand about your film, or that you would like them to
and
understand?
that they might have missed?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. For me, there's something really important, and I think maybe it's very understated in a way. It's the idea of transgression, and because for me, what Ollie London makes in their transformation process is very transgressive, and yeah, I didn't really want to point out it's good or bad, but I just wanted to show this transgressive aspect. And for me, the tale was really interesting because it was it was a way of staging spatially a process of transgression, because you have this rice paper window, and there is a moment, a kind of climax where a hole is pierced in this window, and then there is a gaze, which is kind of killing and transgressive gaze. And yeah, that I think that's kind of the key for me. And yeah.
Okay. Morgan?
Just what we spoke on before, just having empathy for others and for thinking outside of your day-to-day experiences. Everyone has so much going on in their lives all the time that occupy our minds, our thoughts, our feelings. But when we stop considering the people that live above us, around us, beside us, when we don't ever put ourselves in their situations, in their homes, that's when we start to disconnect from others. And I just wanted to remind people to think outside of that and connect with the people around them. Yeah.
Sebastian?
I hope the people got like the first layer of the film, about this wolf that is doing her best to stay hidden and be wild, and about how we as humans, using different technologies, are making that more and more impossible, and what are the consequences for that, for the wolf, for nature, but also for us. And I think, I don't know if people who viewed the film got it, but in the end, you see in the end credits, you see that a lot of the images were taken from live streamed cameras all over the world. So I've used images from wolves and animals all over, and a lot of these cameras, people are live streaming because they do not put passwords on them, or sometimes these are very cheap cameras, mainly coming from China, that you cannot even put a password on. So I guess I would like people to put passwords on their cameras, but also more cameras, like trail cameras and security cameras, are being installed by people in nature, in the forest, of course, to film animals, but they're also filming humans, and I think nature is also for lots of humans still a sort of safe space to not be seen. One of the latest spots. So I think to compare privacy from humans and animals, something like that. I don't know. they can get multiple things out of the film, I guess.
I think most films, there's always a layer of personal that comes into it, and people will think what they want to based on their own experience. But I think that was so beautifully stated by all of you, actually. I think that everyone is going to, hopefully, people who gravitate towards this blog are people already who are more into thoughtful films, and people who want to be challenged. One of the things that we are often like pushing for at this festival are, films that can challenge audiences to think about things as opposed to just distracting audiences, or entertaining audiences. There can be the cinema should have a power to do this. So thank you for presenting your films at Pendance. We are so honored to have all four of you and the others who couldn't make it because of schedule and because of the crazy time difference in Asia to here. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you.
Keep in touch. Yeah.
Thank you.
Keep in touch with us.